My wife said, "If you were better in bed, I wouldn't need him." I smiled and replied, "If you were better at hiding affairs, you'd still have a husband." The words hung in our kitchen like smoke from burnt toast. Vivian stood there in her silk pajamas, the ones I'd bought her for our anniversary 3 months ago, holding a glass of wine that cost more than most people spend on groceries. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled just enough to send tiny ripples across the surface. "Elliott, I didn't mean—" "Sure you did." I leaned back against the granite countertop, arms crossed. 22 years as a structural engineer had taught me to recognize when something was about to collapse. The foundation of our marriage had been showing stress fractures for months. Tonight, the load-bearing beam finally snapped. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. Our custom cabinets, the subway tile backsplash, the farmhouse sink we'd argued about for weeks, all of it suddenly looked like props in someone else's life. The recessed lighting cast harsh shadows across Vivian's face, making her look older than her 38 years. "Who is he?" I asked, though part of me already knew. There'd been signs, late nights at the law firm where she worked as a paralegal, new clothes that didn't come from her usual stores, a password on her phone that she'd never needed before. Vivian set down her wine glass with the careful precision of someone trying not to appear intoxicated. "It's not what you think. What I think is that you just admitted to having an affair." I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used when explaining to contractors why their shortcuts wouldn't pass inspection. "What I think is that instead of discussing whatever problems we might have, you decided to solve them with someone else's help." She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture I'd seen countless times during our 15-year marriage. "You're never here, Elliott. When you are here, you're thinking about work. About your projects, your deadlines, your precious building codes. And Craig Dutton thinks about you?" The name hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating in the kitchen's bright light. She hadn't expected me to know. People never do. "How did you—" "Hotel receipts." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots I'd taken 2 hours ago while she was in the shower. "The Marriott downtown, every Thursday for the past 6 months, always the same room number, always paid for with the credit card you thought I didn't monitor." Vivian's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine: shock, fear, anger, defiance. She landed on indignation. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been paying attention. There's a difference." I set the phone on the counter between us. "Craig Dutton, managing partner at your firm, married to Linda, father of 2, drives a BMW, wears Italian suits, and apparently has very strong opinions about my performance in our bedroom. Elliott, please..." "Please what? Please pretend this conversation never happened? Please go back to being the oblivious husband while you and your boss discuss my inadequacies between meetings?" The refrigerator hummed in the silence. Outside, our neighbor's dog barked at something in the darkness. Normal sounds from a normal evening in our normal suburban neighborhood. Nothing normal about this moment, though. Vivian straightened her shoulders, finding her footing. She'd always been good in confrontations. It's what made her valuable at the law firm. "If you'd paid half as much attention to our marriage as you do to your blueprints, maybe we wouldn't be here. We're here because you made a choice. Multiple choices, actually. 6 months' worth of Thursday choices. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry?" Her voice rose, wine and adrenaline making her reckless. "Fine. I'm sorry you found out. I'm sorry it has to be messy. But I'm not sorry it happened." There it was. The truth, finally. No tears, no begging for forgiveness, no promises to end it. Just cold honesty delivered like a legal brief. I nodded slowly, processing the information. In engineering, you learn to work with the materials you have, not the ones you wish you had. The foundation was gone. Time to demolish and start over. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" Vivian frowned, clearly expecting a different response. Yelling, maybe, threats, dramatic gestures. Okay, I know where we stand now. I picked up my phone, slipped it into my pocket. I'm going to Harold's office tomorrow morning. You should probably call Craig. Let him know the situation has changed. What situation? I smiled. Not a happy smile, but not a bitter one either. More like the expression I wore when a contractor tried to convince me that load-bearing walls were optional. The situation where you're still married to me. I left her standing in the kitchen and walked upstairs to my home office. The room I'd converted from our planned nursery years ago, back when we still thought children were in our future. Now it housed my drafting table, my computer, my filing cabinets full of project specifications and building permits. I locked the door behind me and sat down at my desk. The computer screen cast blue light across architectural drawings for a new office complex downtown. 40-story building, steel and glass, designed to withstand hurricane-force winds and seismic activity. Built to last. Unlike some things. I opened a new browser window and typed in Harold Ashford's name. Harold had been my roommate in college, back when we were both engineering students with more ambition than sense. He'd switched to law school our junior year, claiming he wanted to make real money instead of just building things. We'd stayed friends through the decades, our wives attending the same charity events, our families sharing occasional barbecues. Harold specialized in family law now. Divorce, custody, asset protection. He'd joked once that half his clients were engineers and doctors whose spouses had gotten bored with the predictable income and steady hours. I found his emergency contact number and sent a text. Need to schedule a consultation, soon as possible. Elliott. The response came back within minutes. Trouble in paradise? Can meet tomorrow at 7 a.m. before court. Office. Thanks, it's bad. They always are. Bring documentation. Documentation. I opened my laptop and began creating folders. Bank statements, credit card records, phone bills, email receipts, the digital trail of a marriage coming apart, one transaction at a time. Vivian's voice drifted up from downstairs, talking on the phone. Probably calling Craig, explaining the new complications. I wondered what she was telling him, that her husband had finally caught on, that the comfortable arrangement was about to get messy. I pulled up our joint checking account online. Vivian had been careful about the hotel charges, using her personal credit card, but she'd been sloppy about other things. Cash withdrawals on Thursday afternoons, charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, a jewelry store purchase for $300. I'd never seen the jewelry. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Craig. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Craig Dutton could wait. Right now, I had work to do. The next 3 hours passed in focused concentration. I downloaded statements, organized files, created timelines. By midnight, I had a comprehensive picture of my wife's affair laid out in spreadsheets and folders. 6 months of deception, quantified and categorized. Vivian had gone to bed without saying goodnight. I could hear her moving around in our bedroom, probably packing a bag, or maybe calling her sister Jennifer, looking for sympathy and a place to stay. I leaned back in my desk chair and looked around my office. The degrees on the wall, the awards from professional organizations, the photos from construction sites where my designs had become reality. 22 years of building things that lasted. Tomorrow, I'd start building something else. Not a structure this time, but a strategy. A plan for dismantling a marriage as carefully and thoroughly as I'd once learned to design buildings. The foundation was compromised. Time to bring down the whole structure. I saved my files to a secure cloud account and shut down the computer. Outside, the neighborhood had settled into quiet darkness. Normal people sleeping in normal houses, trusting that tomorrow would be much like today. My tomorrow was going to be very different. Harold Ashford's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind of building that had character but questionable heating. I arrived at 6:55 in the morning, carrying a laptop bag full of evidence and a travel mug of coffee that had already gone cold. Harold met me at the door, looking like he'd been awake for hours. At 52, he'd developed the lean, predatory look of a successful attorney. His gray hair was perfectly styled, his suit expensive but understated. The kind of man who won cases before they went to trial. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Didn't sleep much." I followed him into his office, a room that managed to be both elegant and intimidating. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books, diplomas from Harvard Law School, a place designed to make clients feel like they were in capable hands. Harold poured himself coffee from a machine that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "So, Vivian's having an affair. 6 months with her boss, Craig Dutton." I set my laptop on his desk and opened the files I'd prepared. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, phone records showing calls at unusual hours. Harold studied the documents with the methodical attention he'd once brought to structural engineering problems. "Dutton, I know him. Handles corporate law, some real estate. Married to Linda Dutton. She's on the hospital charity board with my wife. Small world. Small town. Everyone knows everyone else's business, or thinks they do." Harold leaned back in his chair. "What do you want to accomplish here, Elliott? Just the divorce? Or are we talking about something more comprehensive?" Define comprehensive. Asset protection, making sure you don't get taken to the cleaners. Maybe some creative legal remedies for the emotional distress and damage to your reputation. I'd been thinking about this all night, running scenarios like I'd analyze stress loads on a bridge. I want her to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't just blow up someone's life and walk away without getting dirty yourself. Harold smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Now you're speaking my language. Let's talk about your financial situation first. Joint assets, separate accounts, property ownership." We spent the next hour going through the tedious details of a 15-year marriage, the house we'd bought together, the retirement accounts, the savings we'd accumulated through careful budgeting and steady work. On paper, we looked like a successful middle-class couple with a secure future. "Here's the good news," Harold said, making notes on a legal pad. "Maryland is an equitable distribution state, not community property. The court looks at factors like fault, contribution to the marriage, economic circumstances. An affair definitely counts as fault." "And the bad news?" "Vivian works at a law firm. She's going to have access to good legal advice, probably at a discount. This could get expensive and ugly." I thought about Craig Dutton's text message, still unanswered on my phone. "It's already ugly." Harold nodded. "Okay, first priority is protecting your assets. We need to document everything before she has a chance to hide or spend marital funds. I'm going to draft some preliminary papers, get the process started. In the meantime, you need to be smart about how you handle this." Meaning? Meaning don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation. Don't follow her around, don't show up at her workplace, don't contact Craig Dutton. Let me handle the legal side while you focus on damage control. I left Harold's office with a retainer agreement and a list of things to do. Separate bank accounts, change passwords, secure important documents. The practical steps of untangling two lives that had been woven together for 15 years. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of October day that made you remember why you lived in Maryland. I drove to my office at Morrison Engineering, a mid-sized firm that specialized in commercial and residential projects. We occupied a renovated warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. My project manager, Martin Banks, was already at his desk when I arrived. Marty had worked for me for 8 years, a former construction foreman who'd gotten tired of being outside in all weather. He was built like a fire hydrant and had the personality to match, blunt, reliable, and completely without pretense. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Marty said, not looking up from his computer screen. "Worse, someone ran over my marriage." That got his attention. Marty swiveled around in his chair, studying my face with the same intensity he brought to reading blueprints. Vivian? Vivian and her boss. 6 months of Thursday afternoon meetings that weren't about legal briefs. Marty whistled low. Craig Dutton? That pretty boy in the fancy suits? You know him? Know of him. My brother-in-law did some electrical work at their law firm last year. Said Dutton was the type who'd complain about the color of the wire nuts. Marty leaned back in his chair. So what's the plan? Divorce, asset protection, making sure I don't get screwed worse than I already have been. That's the legal plan. What's the Elliott plan? I looked at my friend and colleague, a man who'd helped me navigate everything from difficult clients to building code disputes. Marty had a talent for cutting through complexity to find the simple, direct solution. I'm still working on that part. Well, when you figure it out, let me know if you need backup. I never liked lawyers anyway. The morning passed in a blur of phone calls and project reviews. Normal work, the kind of routine that had structured my life for 2 decades. But underneath the familiar tasks, my mind was spinning through possibilities and scenarios. At lunch, I drove to the marina where Vivian and I kept our boat. Or rather, where we used to keep our boat. The slip was empty now. I'd moved the 30-foot cabin cruiser to a different marina across town the week before, after I'd first suspected something was wrong. The marina bar was exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find near the water. Weathered wood, nautical decorations, and a bartender who'd heard every sob story ever invented. Barbara Chen had been running the place for 15 years, serving drinks and dispensing advice in equal measure. Elliott Mercer, she said, as I took a seat at the bar. Haven't seen you around much lately. Where's Vivian? Vivian's busy with work these days. New projects, demanding boss. Barb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. She'd been tending bar long enough to recognize the subtext in casual conversation. Demanding boss, huh? That can be tough on a marriage. So I'm learning. I ordered a sandwich and a beer, settling in for what I hoped would be an informative conversation. Barb had a network of information that would make the CIA jealous. Marina gossip, restaurant staff, hotel workers. She knew people who knew things. And she had a soft spot for the regular customers who treated her with respect. You know, she said, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. I heard an interesting story the other day about a couple who've been meeting at the downtown Marriott every Thursday. Same room, same time. Very regular, very discreet. Sounds romantic. Sounds expensive. Hotel rooms aren't cheap, especially when you're paying for the same one every week for months. She set down the glass and looked at me directly. Course, some people think privacy is worth the cost. I took a sip of my beer, processing the confirmation of what I already knew. Some people probably don't realize how many eyes are watching, even in private places. Hotel staff talk, parking garage attendants notice regular cars. People see things, Elliott. They always see things. The sandwich arrived, and I ate mechanically while Barb continued her subtle intelligence briefing. Craig Dutton's BMW had been spotted in the hotel garage. Vivian had been seen in the hotel bar, always on Thursday afternoons, always alone until a man in an expensive suit joined her. Thing is, Barb said, refilling my beer without being asked, people in small towns don't like being lied to. They especially don't like it when the lies involve breaking up families. Good to know the community has standards. Oh, we do. And we have long memories, too. She smiled, but there was steel underneath. Anything else I can get you? I left the marina with more than I'd come for. Not just information, but the beginning of understanding how this was going to play out. In a community like ours, reputation mattered. Social connections, professional relationships, the intricate web of who knew whom and who could be trusted. Vivian and Craig had been playing a private game, thinking they were invisible. But privacy was an illusion in a place where everyone eventually knew everyone else's business. My phone buzzed with another text from Craig. We need to resolve this situation. Can we meet? This time, I responded, "Nothing to resolve. Situation is exactly what it appears to be." His reply came back immediately. "This doesn't have to be complicated." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "You made it complicated 6 months ago. Now we deal with the consequences." I drove back to the office, but instead of going inside, I sat in my truck and called Harold. "How quickly can you file the papers?" I asked when he answered. "I can have them ready by tomorrow morning. You want to move fast?" "I want to move decisively, and I want them served at her workplace." Harold was quiet for a moment. "That's going to be public, Elliott. Everyone at her firm will know." "Good. Let them know. Let Craig Dutton explain to his partners why his personal life is creating drama in their workplace." "You're sure about this?" I thought about Vivian's words the night before. Her lack of remorse, her casual cruelty, the 6 months of lies and deception that had turned my marriage into a joke I wasn't in on. "I'm sure. File the papers, Harold. It's time to make this official." After I hung up, I sat in the parking lot and watched people going about their normal lives. Workers heading back from lunch, delivery trucks making their rounds, the ordinary rhythm of a weekday afternoon. Tomorrow, my ordinary life would be over. But that was okay. I'd been living someone else's version of ordinary for too long already. Time to build something new. The divorce papers were served at 11:30 on Friday morning, right at the reception desk of Dutton, Marshall and Associates. I know the exact time because Tara Nesbitt, Vivian's best friend and the firm's HR director, called me 17 minutes later. "Elliott, what the hell are you doing?" Her voice was sharp with panic and indignation. "I'm getting divorced, Tara. I thought that would be obvious from the legal documents." "You had her served at work, in front of everyone?" I was standing in my office, looking out the window at the construction site across the street. A crew was pouring concrete for a foundation, the kind of methodical, irreversible work that I'd always found satisfying. "Seemed like the appropriate venue," I said, "since that's where the problem started." "This is humiliating for her." "Good. Maybe she should have thought about humiliation before she started meeting her boss at hotels every Thursday." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if Tara had hung up. Finally, she spoke again, her voice smaller now. "She told me you two were having problems." "We were. I just didn't know I was the only one trying to solve them within the marriage." "Elliott, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry, Tara. Angry implies this was unexpected. I'm disappointed. There's a difference." I hung up before she could respond and went back to reviewing the structural plans for a new shopping center. Normal work, the kind of problems that had clear solutions and predictable outcomes. Marty appeared in my doorway 20 minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression he got when he had interesting news to share. "So," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "word is that Vivian Mercer got served with divorce papers this morning. Right in the lobby of her law firm in front of God and everybody." Word travels fast. My cousin works for the courier service. Said the whole office went quiet when the server asked for Vivian Mercer in a voice that carried across the lobby. Marty grinned. Also said there was a man in an expensive suit who went pale as paint when he heard the commotion. Interesting. Very interesting. Especially since my cousin recognized the pale man as Craig Dutton, managing partner. Same Craig Dutton whose BMW has been spotted at the downtown Marriott every Thursday for months. I looked up from the blueprints. Your cousin is very observant. Family trait. We notice things. Marty leaned forward. Question is, what happens next? Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Vivian's number. Elliott. Her voice was tight with controlled fury. We need to talk. I think we covered the important points Thursday night. Not over the phone, at home, tonight. I'll be there. I hung up and looked at Marty. Apparently, what happens next is a conversation. Marty stood up, but paused at the door. You want some company for that conversation? Thanks, but this is something I need to handle alone. Fair enough. But Elliott, don't let her turn this around on you. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I worked late, partly because I had deadlines to meet and partly because I wasn't eager to go home. When I finally pulled into our driveway at 7:30, Vivian's car was there along with a silver BMW that I recognized from the hotel parking garage. Craig Dutton was sitting at my kitchen table. He stood up when I walked in, extending his hand like we were meeting at a business conference. Elliott, thanks for agreeing to talk. I looked at his outstretched hand, then at Vivian, who was standing by the counter with her arms crossed. I don't remember inviting you to my house, Craig. We thought it would be better if we could all discuss this like adults. Adults. I set my keys on the counter and opened the refrigerator, pulling out a beer. Is that what we're calling it? Craig was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-40s, perfectly styled hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. The kind of man who was used to being the smartest person in the room and having everyone acknowledge it. Look, Elliott, I know this situation is complicated, but we're all reasonable people. We should be able to work something out. I opened my beer and took a long drink, studying Craig over the bottle. He was nervous, trying to hide it behind lawyer confidence, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to the door. What kind of something did you have in mind? Vivian stepped forward. We want to handle this quietly, privately, without turning it into a public spectacle. Little late for that, don't you think? The public spectacle started 6 months ago. I'm just making it official. Craig cleared his throat. There's no reason this has to damage anyone's reputation or career. We can work out an arrangement that's fair to everyone. An arrangement. I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice conversational. You mean like the arrangement you two have been working out every Thursday afternoon? Elliott? Vivian started. No, let him talk. I'm curious about what Craig considers fair. I looked directly at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. See, from where I stand, you've been getting the benefits of my marriage without any of the responsibilities. My house, my wife, my life, and you just helped yourself to whatever you wanted. Craig's composure slipped slightly. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Vivian was unhappy. She needed someone who understood her, who appreciated her. I nodded slowly. And you were just being a good Samaritan, helping out a colleague in need. We didn't plan for this to happen. But it did happen. Every Thursday. Same hotel, same room. That sounds pretty planned to me. The kitchen felt smaller with 3 people in it, the air thick with tension and unspoken threats. Vivian looked like she wanted to be anywhere else, while Craig was clearly regretting his decision to confront me directly. What do you want? Craig asked finally. I want my wife to move out of my house. I want my divorce finalized without any community property claims on assets she didn't help acquire. And I want both of you to understand that actions have consequences. That's it? Vivian sounded skeptical. That's it. Simple, clean, final. Craig relaxed slightly. That seems reasonable. We can work with that. I smiled. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. They left 10 minutes later, probably thinking they'd gotten off easy. Vivian packed a bag while Craig waited in his BMW, engine running like he was expecting trouble. After they drove away, I called Harold. How did it go? He asked. Better than expected. They think I'm being reasonable. Harold chuckled. Are you being reasonable? Absolutely. I'm being completely reasonable about getting everything I'm entitled to under Maryland law, which, thanks to the adultery, is considerably more than they realize. And the other thing we discussed? Still thinking about that, but I have a feeling opportunities will present themselves. I hung up and walked through my house, noting all the small changes Vivian had made over the years. Throw pillows, artwork, decorative objects that had turned our home into something that looked like a magazine spread. Pretty, but not particularly comfortable. Tomorrow, I'd start making my own changes. But tonight I had research to do. Craig Dutton might think he understood the situation, but he was about to learn that structural engineers are very good at finding weak points in seemingly solid foundations. I opened my laptop and began searching for information about Dutton, Marshall, and Associates, public records, business filings, professional licenses, the digital footprint of a successful law practice. By midnight, I had a comprehensive picture of Craig's professional life, his partnership agreement, his client list, his standing with the State Bar Association. All very impressive, very respectable, also very vulnerable to the right kind of pressure. I saved my research and went to bed in the guest room, leaving the master bedroom to its memories. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. Craig Dutton wanted to handle this quietly and privately. That was fine with me. Some of the most devastating collapses happen without making any noise at all. The first crack in Craig's perfect facade appeared on Monday morning. I was having coffee at the diner across from the courthouse when Harold called with news. "Interesting development," he said. "Craig Dutton just retained Mitchell & Associates to represent him." "Represent him in what?" "He's not getting divorced." "No, but apparently someone filed a complaint with the State Bar Association about his conduct with a subordinate employee. Professional ethics violation, potential harassment, abuse of power dynamics." I stirred sugar into my coffee, watching the morning commuter traffic through the diner's window. Huh. That's unfortunate for him. Very unfortunate. The Bar Association takes these things seriously, especially when there's documented evidence of the relationship. Hotel receipts, credit card records, witness statements. Witness statements? Apparently, several people at his firm have come forward with information about inappropriate behavior. Late-night meetings, closed-door conferences, preferential treatment for certain employees. I thought about Tara Nesbitt's phone call, her panic when she'd learned about the divorce papers. Small towns, people notice things. They do indeed, and they don't like lawyers who can't keep their personal lives separate from their professional responsibilities. After hanging up with Harold, I drove to the construction site where my latest project was taking shape, a mixed-use development that would house retail space on the ground floor and apartments above, the kind of building that would be part of the community for decades. Marty was waiting for me with the daily progress report and a cup of coffee that was still hot. "Heard some interesting news this morning," he said, handing me the coffee. "People are full of interesting news lately." This particular news involves Craig Dutton's BMW being towed from the Marriott parking garage Saturday night. Apparently someone called in a complaint about an abandoned vehicle. I reviewed the contractor's work from the previous day, noting the progress on the electrical rough-in. Abandoned how? Flat tires. All 4 of them. Hotel security figured it had been vandalized and called for a tow when nobody claimed it after 24 hours. That's unfortunate. Expensive tires on those BMWs. Very expensive. Plus, the towing fee, storage costs, and the inconvenience of being stranded downtown on a Saturday night. Marty grinned. Of course, there's no telling who might have called in that complaint. Could have been anyone who happened to notice a suspicious vehicle. I nodded thoughtfully. Community-minded citizens. Got to appreciate people who look out for neighborhood security. The morning passed in routine inspections and progress meetings. Normal work that felt increasingly surreal against the backdrop of my disintegrating marriage. But routine was good. Routine kept me grounded while everything else spun out of control. At lunch, I drove to the marina to check on the boat. The slip fees were paid through the end of the year, and I wanted to make sure everything was secure before the weather turned cold. Barb was working the lunch shift, serving sandwiches and beer to the usual crowd of retirees and off-duty workers. She nodded when I took a seat at the bar. "Elliott, how are you holding up?" "Day by day. learning things about myself I didn't know. Such as? Such as I'm better at strategic thinking than I gave myself credit for. Barb wiped down the bar with a rag that had seen better days. Strategic thinking can be useful, especially when you're dealing with people who think they're smarter than everyone else. Speaking of which, I heard Craig Dutton had some car trouble over the weekend. Did he now? That's a shame. Those fancy cars can be temperamental. She poured me a beer without being asked. Course, some people might say that parking in the same spot every week for months makes you predictable, and predictable can be dangerous. Dangerous how? Well, if someone wanted to cause trouble for you, they'd know exactly where to find you. Same day, same time, same place. Creatures of habit make easy targets. I sipped my beer and considered this wisdom. Good thing I'm not a creature of habit. No, you're not. You're more like a creature of opportunity, and opportunities have a way of multiplying when you know how to recognize them. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This has to stop. We can work something out. I showed the message to Barb. Recognize the number? She glanced at it and shook her head. But I recognize the desperation. That's the sound of someone who's starting to realize they're not in control anymore. I typed back, nothing to work out. Situation is resolving itself. The response came immediately. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This time, I didn't reply. Instead, I finished my beer and paid the tab. Barb, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make sure their community knew about unethical behavior by local professionals, what would be the most effective approach? She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Hypothetically, I'd say information travels fastest when it comes from multiple sources. People trust what they hear from friends more than what they read in newspapers. And if someone wanted to make sure that information was accurate? Well, accuracy is important. Documentation, witnesses, corroborating evidence, the kind of proof that stands up to scrutiny. She smiled. Hypothetically speaking, I left the marina with a better understanding of how information flowed through our community, not through official channels, but through the informal networks of people who knew things. That afternoon, I made a series of phone calls, not to journalists or officials, but to friends and colleagues who might be interested in certain facts about professional conduct and ethical violations. By 5 o'clock, those facts were circulating through the community like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. My phone rang as I was leaving the office. Vivian's number. Elliott, you need to stop this. Stop what? You know what? The bar complaint, the rumors, the harassment. Craig's partners are asking questions. I got into my truck and started the engine. Questions about what? About his relationship with me. About whether it affects his ability to represent clients. About whether the firm's reputation is at risk. Those sound like reasonable questions for partners to ask. This isn't a game, Elliott. People's careers are at stake. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed home. You're right, it's not a game. Games have rules that everyone agrees to follow. What do you want? I want what I've always wanted. A divorce, a fair settlement, and for both of you to understand that choices have consequences. We understand. We get it. Can't we just move forward? We are moving forward, just not in the direction you expected. I hung up and drove through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past houses where I knew the owners, where I'd been invited to barbecues and birthday parties. A community where reputation mattered and word traveled fast. Craig Dutton had made the mistake of thinking he could compartmentalize his life, keep his professional reputation separate from his personal choices. But in a place like this, everything was connected. He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. My phone buzzed with another text. We need to meet, tonight, just you and me. This time, the number was Craig's. I thought about it for a moment, then replied, Marina Bar, 8 o'clock, come alone. The response was immediate. "Thank you." I smiled as I pulled into my driveway. Craig Dutton thought he was going to negotiate his way out of this situation. He thought he could find some arrangement that would make the problems go away. He was about to discover that some problems don't have solutions. They just have endings. Craig Dutton arrived at the Marina bar 10 minutes early, which told me he was more desperate than I'd expected. He'd traded his usual expensive suit for khakis and a polo shirt, probably thinking casual clothes would make him seem more approachable. Instead, he just looked like a lawyer trying to blend in with normal people. I watched him from my truck for a few minutes before going inside. He'd chosen a corner table away from the bar, somewhere private where we could talk without being overheard. Smart thinking, except that Barb had already positioned herself where she could see our entire conversation. "Elliott." He stood up when I approached, extending his hand again. This time, I ignored it completely. "Craig." I took the seat across from him, noting the tension lines around his eyes, the way his fingers drummed against the table. "You look stressed. This situation has gotten out of hand." "Has it? Seems pretty straightforward to me. You had an affair with my wife, I filed for divorce, and now you're dealing with the professional consequences of your personal choices." The bar was busier than usual for a Tuesday night. A few regulars at the bar, a couple playing pool in the corner, the usual mix of marina workers and boat owners. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that they were witnessing what might be Craig Dutton's last attempt to salvage his reputation. "The bar complaint is frivolous," Craig said, keeping his voice low. "There's no evidence of professional misconduct. 6 months of hotel receipts might suggest otherwise. A consensual relationship between adults isn't professional misconduct." I signaled Barb for a beer. "A managing partner having an affair with a married employee? I'm pretty sure the ethics board will have opinions about power dynamics and workplace harassment." Craig's jaw tightened. "Vivian wasn't coerced. She made her own choices." "She did, and now she gets to explain those choices to your partners, your clients, and anyone else who's interested in how Dutton, Marshall, and Associates handles professional boundaries." Barb brought my beer and lingered long enough to make eye contact with Craig. "Evening, Mr. Dutton. Haven't seen you around here before." "No, I don't usually—" He trailed off, realizing that explaining his presence might raise more questions than it answered. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. Let me know if you need anything." Barb's smile was friendly enough, but there was steel underneath. She'd already sized up the situation and chosen her side. After she left, Craig leaned forward. "What's it going to take to make this stop?" "Make what stop? The complaints, the rumors, the harassment? What do you want?" I took a sip of my beer and considered the question. What did I want? 6 months ago, I'd wanted a stable marriage and a quiet life. 3 days ago, I'd wanted a clean divorce and fair settlement. Now? I want you to understand something, Craig. You didn't just have an affair with my wife. You made a calculation. You decided that what you wanted was more important than my marriage, my feelings, or the professional standards you're supposed to uphold. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You saw something you wanted, and you took it. No consideration for the consequences, no thought about who might get hurt, just pure entitlement. Craig's composure was starting to crack. Fine. You're right. I made mistakes. But destroying my career isn't going to fix your marriage. My marriage is over, has been since Thursday night when Vivian made it clear she had no intention of ending her relationship with you. I leaned back in my chair. But you're wrong about one thing. I'm not destroying your career. You did that yourself. The bar complaint is based on documented evidence of your behavior. The questions from your partners are based on their legitimate concerns about the firm's reputation. The rumors in the community are based on facts that multiple people have observed over 6 months. I could see him processing this, trying to find an angle that would give him some leverage. But there wasn't one. He'd painted himself into a corner, and now he was looking for someone else to blame. What about Vivian? She's going to lose her job. Probably. That's unfortunate, but it's a consequence of her choices, not mine. You're destroying both our lives out of spite. I finished my beer and set the bottle on the table. I'm not destroying anything, Craig. I'm just making sure that the truth gets told. What happens after that is up to other people. Craig stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when he realized that negotiation wasn't going to work, that I wasn't interested in deals or arrangements or finding some way for everyone to save face. You think you're so righteous? He said finally. So morally superior. But you're just as vindictive as anyone else. Maybe, but I'm vindictive with cause. You're just vindictive with expensive suits. I stood up to leave, but Craig grabbed my arm. This isn't over. The bar went quiet. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that everyone could sense the tension at our table. I looked down at Craig's hand on my arm, then back at his face. Let go of me. He held on for another second, trying to salvage some dignity through intimidation. But we both knew he'd already lost. He released my arm and sat back in his chair. Smart choice, I said. Have a good evening, Craig. I left him sitting at the table and walked to the bar, where Barb was pretending to clean glasses while keeping an eye on the situation. Everything okay? She asked. Everything's fine. Craig was just leaving. She nodded. Good. We like to keep things peaceful here. I paid for my beer and walked outside to my truck. Through the bar's window, I could see Craig still sitting at the table, probably trying to figure out his next move. But there wasn't a next move. The game was over, and he'd lost. My phone rang as I was driving home. Harold's number. Interesting news, he said without preamble. Craig Dutton just called Mitchell and Associates. Apparently, he wants to explore his legal options regarding harassment and defamation. Is he going to file suit? Mitchell told him he doesn't have a case. Everything that's happened is based on documented facts and legitimate consequences of his own behavior. No harassment, no defamation, no grounds for any kind of legal action. I turned into my neighborhood, passing houses where lights were coming on as families settled in for the evening. Normal people with normal problems, unaware that their community was in the process of ejecting 2 members who'd violated the unwritten rules of decent behavior. What about the bar complaint? I asked. That's moving forward. The ethics board has scheduled a hearing for next month. Even if they don't impose serious sanctions, the investigation alone is going to damage his reputation. And Vivian? Her situation is more complicated. She's not a lawyer, so the Bar Association doesn't have jurisdiction over her. But her employer does. And from what I'm hearing, Dutton, Marshall and Associates is not happy about the negative attention. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck, looking at the house that had been my home for 15 years. Tomorrow, it would still be my home. But Vivian would be gone, Craig would be dealing with professional consequences, and I would be free to start rebuilding my life. Harold, I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Shoot. Am I being too vindictive? Too harsh? Harold was quiet for a moment. Elliott, 3 months ago, you were a happily married man with a stable life. Your wife and her boss decided to blow that up for their own gratification. They made their choices without considering how it would affect you. Now they're facing the consequences of those choices, and they don't like it. That's not really an answer. Yes, it is. You're not being vindictive, you're being thorough. There's a difference. After I hung up, I sat in my truck for a few more minutes, thinking about the conversation with Craig. He'd seemed genuinely surprised that his actions had consequences beyond the immediate gratification of the affair, like he'd expected to be able to compartmentalize his life indefinitely. But life doesn't work that way. Everything is connected, especially in a small community where everyone knows everyone else. Actions ripple outward, affecting relationships and reputations in ways that can't be predicted or controlled. Craig and Vivian were about to learn that lesson in the most painful way possible. I got out of the truck and walked to my front door, keys in hand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make sure that justice was served. But tonight, I was going to sleep well for the first time in months. The end came faster than I'd expected, but not in the way anyone had planned. Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after Vivian's confession, I was reviewing foundation specs when Marty burst into my office with the kind of expression that usually meant either very good news or complete disaster. "You need to see this," he said, dropping a newspaper on my desk. The headline read, "Local law firm under investigation for ethics violations." Below it was a photo of Craig Dutton, looking harried as he walked into the courthouse, flanked by his attorney and what appeared to be several very unhappy business partners. "It gets better," Marty said, settling into his chair. "Keep reading." The article detailed the Bar Association's investigation into allegations of professional misconduct, abuse of power, and violation of workplace harassment policies. It mentioned that several employees had come forward with complaints about inappropriate behavior and favoritism. It also noted that the firm's managing partners were conducting their own internal review. But the real bombshell was in the third paragraph. Sources close to the investigation report that the complaints stem from a documented affair between Dutton and a married subordinate employee, raising questions about consent, power dynamics, and the firm's oversight of professional conduct. "They don't name Vivian directly," I noted. "Don't need to. Everyone in town knows who the married subordinate employee is." Marty grinned. "But it gets even better. Turn to page 3. Page 3 contained a smaller article about the firm's major clients expressing concern about the negative publicity. 2 corporate clients had already announced they were reviewing their legal representation. The hospital board, where Craig's wife Linda served as treasurer, had called an emergency meeting to discuss whether Craig's conduct reflected poorly on the institution. "Small towns," I said. "Small towns with long memories and strong opinions about family values." Marty leaned back in his chair. "Word is that Craig's partners gave him an ultimatum yesterday: resign voluntarily or be voted out." My phone rang before I could respond. Harold's number. "Have you seen the paper?" he asked. "Just finished reading it. Thorough reporting." Very thorough, almost like someone provided the reporter with a comprehensive timeline of events, complete with documentation and witness statements. I looked out my office window at the construction crew across the street. They were working on the upper floors now, the building taking shape according to the plans I'd drawn months ago. Steady progress, following a logical sequence of steps. Hypothetically speaking, if someone had provided such documentation, would that be problematic? Hypothetically? Not at all. Citizens have a right to report professional misconduct to appropriate authorities and media outlets, as long as the information is accurate and provided in good faith. And if that information happened to come from multiple sources? Even better. Corroboration strengthens credibility. After hanging up with Harold, I tried to focus on work, but the phone kept ringing. Colleagues who'd seen the article, friends who wanted to know how I was handling the situation, even a few people I barely knew who felt compelled to express their opinions about adultery and professional ethics. At lunch, I drove to the marina, partly for the peace and quiet, and partly because I was curious about community reaction. The bar was packed, which was unusual for a Thursday afternoon. Apparently, the newspaper article had made Craig and Vivian the topic of the day. Barb was working behind the bar, moving with the efficient grace of someone who'd been handling crowds for decades. She nodded when she saw me, then made her way over when the rush died down. "Busy day?" I asked. "Busiest Thursday we've had in months. Funny how a little scandal brings people together." She poured me a beer without being asked. "Course, some scandals are more popular than others." "Popular how?" "Well, when it's a story about powerful people taking advantage of their positions and hurting regular folks, people tend to take sides pretty quickly." She gestured toward the crowd. And in this case, the sides are pretty clear. I looked around the bar, noting the faces of people I'd known for years. Marina workers, retirees, small business owners, the backbone of the community, people who worked hard and played by the rules and didn't have much patience for those who didn't. Any word on how the principals are handling the attention? Vivian hasn't been seen since yesterday. Word is she's staying with her sister in Baltimore. Barb wiped down the bar with practiced efficiency. Craig showed up at his office this morning, but he was gone by 10. Apparently there was a partners meeting that didn't go well. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Linda Dutton. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a moment, then showed it to Barb. "Craig's wife," she said. "Interesting. What do you think she wants?" "Only one way to find out," I typed back. "When and where?" The response came quickly. "Now, Marina parking lot. I'm in the white Mercedes." I finished my beer and walked outside. The white Mercedes was parked at the far end of the lot, away from the main traffic. Linda Dutton was sitting in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She rolled down the window as I approached. "Elliott Mercer? Mrs. Dutton, what can I do for you? You can tell me why you're trying to destroy my family." Linda Dutton was an attractive woman in her early 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that came from money and careful attention to detail. But today, she looked tired and strained, like someone who'd been crying recently. "I'm not trying to destroy anything," I said. "I'm trying to get divorced from my unfaithful wife. By humiliating Craig publicly? By filing complaints with the Bar Association? By talking to reporters? By making sure that people understand what happened and why." She removed her sunglasses, and I could see that she had indeed been crying. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to my children? They're hearing about their father's affair at school from their friends. They're asking me questions I don't know how to answer." I felt a stab of sympathy for her. Linda Dutton hadn't chosen any of this. Like me, she was collateral damage from her spouse's selfish decisions. "I'm sorry your children are being hurt," I said. "But I didn't create this situation. Your husband and my wife did. You could have handled it privately, quietly. Instead, you've turned it into a public spectacle. Your husband had 6 months to handle it quietly. He chose not to." Linda stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with emotions that probably ranged from anger to grief to humiliation. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want my divorce finalized. I want my assets protected. And I want both your husband and my wife to understand that their actions have consequences." "And after that? When you've gotten everything you want? Will it be over?" I thought about the question seriously. A week ago, I might have said yes. But the past few days had shown me something about myself that I hadn't known before. I was capable of sustained, methodical revenge. I was good at it, and part of me was enjoying it. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I suppose that depends on whether they've learned anything from the experience." Linda put her sunglasses back on. "Craig's resigning from the firm. We're probably going to have to sell the house, maybe leave town. Is that enough consequences for you?" "That's not up to me. Those are the natural results of the choices your husband made." "Natural results." She started the engine. "You sound like you think you're some kind of force of nature, but you're just a man with hurt feelings and a talent for revenge." She drove away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the parking lot with an uncomfortable truth. Linda Dutton was right. I was just a man with hurt feelings and a talent for revenge. The question was, what was I going to do with that talent? My phone rang. Vivian's number. "Elliott." Her voice was small, defeated. "Can we talk?" "We're talking now. I mean in person, please. There are things I need to say." I looked at my watch. 2:30 in the afternoon. "Where are you?" "Baltimore, at Jennifer's house. But I can drive down. Meet me at the house in an hour?" "Fine. 1 hour." I drove home slowly, taking the long route through neighborhoods where I'd lived and worked for 2 decades. Past the elementary school where Vivian and I had once volunteered for fundraisers. Past the park where we'd walked on Sunday mornings. Past the life we'd built together before she decided it wasn't enough. Vivian's car was already in the driveway when I arrived. She was sitting on the front porch, looking smaller than I remembered. The confident, sharp-tongued woman who delivered her devastating confession a week ago had been replaced by someone who looked exhausted and beaten down. "Thank you for coming," she said as I walked up the steps. "It's my house." "I know. I meant thank you for agreeing to see me." I unlocked the front door and we went inside. The house felt different somehow, like it was already adjusting to being a single-person residence. Lighter, maybe, or just less tense. Vivian sat on the couch where we'd watched movies and argued about finances and planned vacations we'd never taken. I remained standing, keeping the coffee table between us. "I saw the newspaper," she said. "Everyone saw the newspaper. Craig's career is over. The firm voted him out this morning. Linda's filing for divorce." I'm sorry to hear that. And surprisingly, I was. Linda Dutton didn't deserve to have her life blown up because of her husband's selfishness. "Are you?" "Sorry, I mean." I considered the question. "I'm sorry that innocent people are getting hurt. I'm not sorry that Craig is facing consequences for his actions." Vivian nodded slowly. "What about me? Am I facing consequences, or am I just collateral damage?" "What do you think?" "I think I made terrible choices. I think I hurt you in ways I didn't fully understand at the time, and I think I'm paying a price that's probably fair, even if it doesn't feel that way." She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 15 years ago, before the ambition and dissatisfaction had hardened her into someone I barely recognized. "I lost my job," she said. "The firm let me go yesterday. Professional conduct policy violation." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" "Yes. Despite everything, I never wanted you to be unemployed." "But you're not going to do anything to help me." It wasn't a question, and I didn't treat it like one. "No, I'm not." Vivian stood up, smoothing down her skirt in a gesture I'd seen thousands of times. "The divorce papers Harold filed are pretty comprehensive. If I sign them as written, I walk away with almost nothing. You walk away with what you brought to the marriage: your car, your clothes, your personal possessions. That seems fair. 15 years of marriage, and I get my car and my clothes. 15 years of marriage that you ended when you decided Craig Dutton was more important than our vows." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the backyard we'd landscaped together 3 summers ago. "I know you probably won't believe this," she said finally, "but I never meant for it to happen. Craig and I, it just developed. Over 6 months, at the same hotel every Thursday. That's not something that just develops, Vivian. That's something you plan and sustain and choose to continue." "You're right." She turned back to me. "I made choices. Every week for 6 months, I chose Craig over you. Over us. And now I have to live with the consequences." "Yes, you do. Will you ever forgive me?" The question hung in the air between us, carrying the weight of 15 years and all the might-have-beens we'd never explore. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and it doesn't mean I'm going to make this easy for you." Vivian nodded, accepting the verdict. "I'll sign the papers. Harold can have them by tomorrow morning." "Good." She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. "Elliott, for what it's worth, you deserved better than what I gave you." "Yes, I did." After she left, I walked through the house one more time, noting all the spaces that would need to be filled or rearranged. The empty closet space, the missing toiletries, the gaps where her books and decorations had been. But instead of feeling sad or nostalgic, I felt something else. Relief, maybe, or possibility. My phone rang. Harold's number. Vivian just called. She's signing the papers. Good. How soon can we finalize everything? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Maryland has a waiting period, but given the circumstances, we can expedite the process. And after that? After that, you're a free man, free to rebuild your life however you want. I looked around my house now, not ours, and thought about what that might look like. New furniture, maybe. Different routines. A life built around my own choices instead of compromises with someone who'd never been satisfied with what we had. Harold, that thing we discussed about Craig's professional conduct? What about it? How long does a bar association investigation usually take? 6 months to a year, depending on the complexity of the case and the cooperation of the parties involved. And the results are public record? Absolutely. Disciplinary actions, sanctions, license suspensions, all a matter of public record. I smiled, looking out at the construction site across the street. The building was nearly finished now, ready to serve its purpose for decades to come. Good to know. Thanks, Harold. Elliott, are you okay? I'm better than okay. I'm exactly where I need to be. After I hung up, I opened a bottle of beer and sat on my front porch, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. Lights coming on in windows, families gathering for dinner, the ordinary rhythm of people living ordinary lives. Tomorrow, I'd start making my own ordinary life. But tonight, I was content to sit and reflect on the week that had changed everything. Vivian had said I deserved better than what she'd given me. She was right. And now I was free to find it. The divorce was finalized before she could apologize, but by then, apologies didn't matter anymore. Justice, it turned out, was much more satisfying than forgiveness.